In this video, we're going to talk about what's going on at Intel, right? Because Intel is going through massive layoffs, 20,000 employees that are losing their job, and employees are losing their job at a very fast rate like many other tech firms. So we're going to go through a few examples, a few real life scenarios about people who are looking for jobs, losing their job, and how difficult it can be right now in the tech industry. But this applies to many other people who are dealing with layoffs, right? So there's lots of lessons we can learn from this particular video. First clip we're going to look at is how layoffs are impacting older people, right? Experienced guys who try to stick with the stable life, the stable 9-to-5 route, and it wasn't working out for them. They tried different things, tried going to startups, other tech companies, and how it can be quite difficult. So let's listen to his story here.
About 2 months ago, I left a relatively stable job at a very large software company to take a chance, as I have done at other times in my past, take a chance on a smaller e-commerce company. A former colleague of mine worked there. He said, hey, it's a good opportunity. There's some exciting stuff going on here. We can really make a difference. You'll get back into pre-sales. You'll get paid more. So I was like, let's do it. Why not? I figure this will last maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and then I can land on my feet somewhere else if it doesn't work out. Or if it does work out, it'll be great. Exactly 30 days after I joined, the company had a 20% reduction in force, which included me. So now, 1 month later, I am in the midst of what has to be one of the worst, if not the worst, tech job market that I've ever experienced in my lifetime. All of the horror stories you hear about ghosting and ghost jobs and super long interview processes and all the stuff, it's all true. I have lived it. And I've been doing all the right things, right? I'm not just applying directly on the website. I'm getting referrals, right? I'm getting inroads. I'm reaching out to hiring managers. I'm doing all the right things. And my professional network, by the way, has been fantastic. They have really come through this time, but even that's not helping. I've been rejected from jobs where I was highly referred by somebody even before I could interview with the HR person. I've already been rejected from 3 jobs after a full interview process. And I have a couple of others in the pipeline right now, but for the first time in my life, I'm really wondering if I'm going to be able to stay in tech. And it's so frustrating because I know that I've got, as they say, a lot left in the tank. I know my value. I know what I can contribute. I know I can help out a lot of software companies. And by the way, if you happen to work in tech and you have any openings in sales or pre-sales or even product.
So to quote Mark Henry, if you know the reference, he says he's got a lot left in the tank, right? And this is the difficulty of many people who have a lot of experience, right? One thing I'd say about his particular situation before we go back to Intel and other people in the tech industry, there's a lot of risk of job hopping, right? Particularly if you're more at advanced years, you're older, because if you're more junior, you can easily job hop, and also you have less financial responsibility. So if you have a bit of a gap in your resume, it's not that big a deal, and you don't have to pay for your kids and wife and their living standards, right? The other thing is, if you're switching to a small company, there's always a risk of that startup having a startup kind of work culture where they may overwork you. They might have job cuts before you expect it to be cutting jobs. So there's all type of scenarios that can occur, right? The other thing is, if his friend had referred him to work there and he lost his job after 30 days, these are the things you got to be careful of, right? How stable are things? How much trust should you put in other people giving you advice of where to work, right? And this goes back to something I offer, which is career coaching, right? I've worked in top finance industry at top companies for over 10 years at Goldman, Morgan Stanley, and HSBC, and time again secured top job interviews and job offers from companies like JP Morgan and Deloitte, Arrowgrass, hedge funds, private equity firms. And I've worked with my clients across all industries: tech, finance, accounting, law, even the culinary industry, private equity, real estate, to help them build power, pay, and freedom and push their career forward in the right direction. Because many people, they end up getting caught up in this scenario like this guy, right? They don't know what they're doing, or they just get caught up in a series of unfortunate events, right? Like this guy job hopping, now he can't get back into the industry that he wants to work in, right? And it's not necessarily his fault. So this is something I work with my clients, right? To avoid these situations, to build real financial freedom over the long term, because with no disrespect to this guy, you don't want to be this age desperately searching for a job. You want to have the financial freedom you're looking for. And that's what I provide throughout my career coaching, because it's more, I cover things like investing, personal finance, budgeting, saving and investing, job search process, dealing with office politics, getting promoted. It's all covered in one coaching program. And this is how you can avoid some of the scenarios we're seeing here. But if we go back to what this guy is saying, right? So sometimes it is safe to play it safer at bigger companies, particularly if you are older, right? Ride out that high-paying middle management role or senior management role, because you're not going to find it at smaller companies. And if you are, they're going to really work you hard, and it could be less stable. So some people who are stuck in their late 40s, early 50s in a senior management role, they're trusted, they've been there for 20 years. For younger generations, I typically advise you to do a bit of job hopping, right? To not stick around for that low salary and the delayed promotion process. But if you're older than 45, maybe you should stick in what you're doing and focus on the side hustle, because there is more risk when you do job hop. You might get a similar salary, but it's less security, right? They're offered you security at the older generations, and you can leverage that to your benefit and focus on more increased other investment opportunities. Maybe you want to be moving abroad, things like that. Now, the difference between this and a side hustle is, at least with a side hustle, you got a stable 9 to 5 to keep you going, right? When you do something like this, a big career move, it's hard to go back. He's finding it a hard time going back to any major companies, right, in the tech industry. So you got to think carefully about these big career moves. There's more risk here than a side hustle. So particularly if you're older, maybe you should focus on a side hustle rather than just job hopping to a startup, unless you're sure it's going to work out. Now, many people are getting pushed out of top industries. It's not just tech. It's not just this guy. I'm not just having a go at this guy, but there are many other people. For example, in HSBC, there have been a lot of layoffs, which is a European investment bank. And thousands of people have been laid off from HSBC, and the job market for finance is kind of flooded right now in London. Because many people are looking for jobs, not only from HSBC, but other banks that have had major job cuts. So some people are going to the UAE, Dubai, Abu Dhabi for higher pay and low tax. Other people are dealing with ageism, looking at other investments, maybe property investments. And these are older people who would have had those higher salaries for longer time periods. So they do have other income sources. So it's a very interesting dynamic. But we've got an older guy here, but now we're going to look at a younger woman who's also in tech. And she dealt with a very difficult scenario with a long job search. So let's listen to a bit of her story here.
I got the offer. That took a long time, but I got an offer. So I guess now I'm not unemployed. So let's sit down and go into this in more detail. I wanted to go over the stats and the job search process. I applied to 57 roles, which is a combination of remote and hybrid roles. And I only applied to roles that I thought were a good fit for me. Out of all those applications, I got 35 official rejections and 22 I never heard a reply from. I received 6 HR phone screens, and after the phone screens, I dropped 2 of the roles, since they were not a good fit. And I went through 3 interview loops. Only one of those interview loops made it to the final round, and I got an offer and I did accept it. Out of all the applications, 4 of them were through referrals. All of these companies, I went further than the first round. And these were the only companies that I went further than the first round. So I guess it does pay to get a referral. I looked for jobs mostly through LinkedIn and also built in, since I've worked in startups in the past. I did get laid off the beginning of February and received my offer at the end of June, which is around 4.5 months. I think it is a long time to go without a job, but I've heard the average amount of time to get a job in this economy after getting laid off is 6 to 12 months, which is even longer. I did get really discouraged a few times after interview loops ended and I had nothing in the pipeline. I also moved in the middle of all of this, which was planned before even losing my job. But during the whole moving process, I did take a break and some time from applying to jobs and interviewing, since I just found it too hard to juggle moving and unpacking, which is both 2 stressful processes. Job searching in tech right now is definitely difficult. There are weeks where I wanted to apply to a job and I would spend hours searching, and I wouldn't be able to apply to any since there were no jobs that were a fit. I know there are others out there in the same boat. I would say hang in there, good luck with your search, and you will land a job when the time is right.
So she went through some interesting stats there, right? So there's a couple points here. So she said she had 57 job applications, some were remote and hybrid, 35 rejections, 22 no replies, 6 phone interviews, 4 referrals to help her get a job, 3 job applications that went to interview rounds, and 1 job offer. So from 57 to 1 job offer. It wasn't like 2 job offers where she could leverage one to get a job opportunity in the other, or the interview process in the other, or negotiate salary increases by leveraging 2 different job offers. So from 57 job applications to 1 job offer, right? And it took about 5 months in total. So this is the reality. It's kind of tough. There's no stability. There's a lot of stress, pain, and pressure to really get your feet on the ground in these type of scenarios, right? And that's why I thought it was interesting to include this older guy and this younger woman to show you the real world impact of this type of very dysfunctional economy. So if we continue with it here, it's talking in this article from Cali Tech. It talks about here, each department will now assess its own structure. Executives explained, right? They want to see if employees want to voluntary buyouts of their job contract, like pushing people out by giving them some money. They caution that not all requests to leave would be accepted. Another thing they mentioned, that they're not offering early retirement at this stage, but they might offer it at later stages. The other thing I wanted to say is, a lot of people who are in older generations, and what ends up happening is these companies will give them like a substantial amount of money, whatever that could be, maybe 50,000, 100,000, whatever that would be, and say, we'd want you to retire early, and they give you a specific amount of money. So they kind of push people out, older people out at that stage. In this case, it's a bit awkward. They're saying that we're not going to offer early retirement at this stage, which is just showing you how you could be a long-term loyal employee and then they might not offer you a pay package when you're getting pushed out into a layoff when you're in your late 50s, right? And you might really struggle to find your next job. This is the difficult scenarios that they're putting people in. They start to use these particular words that really stand out to me in some of their public in their memos to their employees, right? They start talking about how they want employees to return to the office, and they want to remove unnecessary meetings and streamline processes and boost productivity, right? So one thing they're focused on, returning to the office. Now, if I was running a company and I wanted it to be efficient, I would consider to what extent we need to pay for all this expensive commercial real estate when people could be working from home. But of course, they want control. It's not about hiring and keeping the best quality employees. They'd rather push people back to the office, and some people will have to deal with, out of their company, because they'll be like, okay, I'll accept a layoff because I want to work from home. I don't want to go back to the office. That's called a soft layoff, when they essentially push you back to the office through return to the office and you want to work from home. There's a bit of a disagreement there and you end up having to quit. Now, the other thing they tend to use in a lot of this languaging, this CEO talks about flattening the organization, complexity. What a lot of these terms mean is just like removing layers of management, right? Or essentially is another way of less layers of management, right? And the other thing is, when there's less layers of management, there's less options for you to progress. So if you say there were 5 managers managing a team of 50 employees, and then it goes to 2 managers managing a team of 50 employees, then obviously if you want to get promoted and make it to the next level, there's less opportunities there. So it can be quite difficult, right? Even if you're not someone who's losing their job, it's like they're reducing the roles, not just reducing the jobs, but reducing the roles through flattening the organization, right? They talk about in some of their public disclosures, the CEO of Intel, that there are essentially 8 or more layers of management, and they want to reduce that. And now I think from my experience in finance that there are too many layers of management, there's too many layers of bureaucracy, so that kind of makes sense. But of course, that does lead to job cuts. Now, the other thing they talk about reducing, right, is unproductive meetings, unnecessary admin and paperwork. And I just find it suspicious that why is that coming up now? That has existed for decades. So why are they suddenly deciding to reduce it now? And I think partly due to the lockdown period, people working from home, people realize how much time they waste during the day not doing any actual work or just doing pointless busy work. And I guess in a good way, it's like they're reducing that, but obviously that results in job losses too. Now, I think when we see these type of big layoffs and this information goes viral, morale for society at large, because many people, progress their life. Can you imagine if you're at university, you want to go into the tech industry, you hear about Microsoft job cuts, Intel job cuts, then Facebook, Meta, and all these other companies doing massive job cuts. It is kind of demotivating, but also the way they're removing layers of middle management, it reminds me of just the way they're removing the middle class from society. You have lots of people at the bottom, a few people at the top, and few in the middle. The many people in the middle are being wiped out financially, right? So the thing is, did corporations just suddenly realize that management layers, there were too many of them, and there's too time wasting meetings and admin work, right? I think all companies realizing at the same time is a bit suspicious. I don't know if they want a form of mass unemployment and UBI immediately, or removing the middle class. There's a bigger agenda at play here. I don't think they suddenly figured this out. We many to use the phrase on channel and other channels too about how the office is daycare for adults, right? The office has been daycare for adults. There's a bit of a conspiracy to push women into the workplace so they have less kids. All these things have been there for decades. Like all of a sudden there's like thousands of people losing their job. It's like you've had these pointless jobs that have existed, these BS jobs, bullshit jobs that have been there for literal decades, and now you're getting rid of them. Like it comes across a bit suspicious, like there's a bigger agenda at play here, like whether it's UBI or something else. Now if we look at this layoff analytical site, right, it talks about, the charts and a bit of the layoff statistics. Now you can see back in 2024, if we just focus on the recent years, we see that extremely high layoffs at the start of last year in January 2024. Then we see a decrease, a slight spike in August, a decrease again, a slight spike in April, and then a bit of a decrease. And then July, this month, there's been a bit of a spike. Now, it's very interesting trends, right? I wouldn't say people should give up on tech, but they should think about where they're positioned, what skills they need to develop to be their long-term or alternative income sources, and other skills outside the industry they want to focus on, rather than giving up on tech careers, right? And we also see this longer-term 2020 to 2025, right? So we've got a slight increase in Q2 2020, as we'd expect when people were going into lockdown. Then we see a peaks around Q2 of 2020, throughout 2022, and then 2023 was the massive spike of job losses, but then relative to that there've been a massive decrease in the layoffs. So that's quite a steep drop in layoffs from Q1 2023 to 2025. Now the reason why I say this is because people get so caught up in the recent news. Oh, there's been 20,000 job cuts at Intel, 9,000 job cuts at Microsoft, or whatever the number is, right? Don't get caught up in the hype, right? In some tech firms, they're actually hiring more to develop their AI, hiring more employees to help with AI specific tech roles. So I won't get too caught up in the hype. I know this big news can be worrying for everyone, right? You see like, oh, the economy is really going down. People aren't spending money, less people going to restaurants, less retail jobs, all this type of thing. But it's like, just kind of being in the middle of the storm and planning your next move, as easy as it is to say rather than do. Let's understand what the broader trend is, where you fit in that, and how you can best leverage this information to benefit you, right? In this case, you'd be like, okay, well, Intel is hiring less, they're looking at less roles in middle management. Do I need to focus more on AI skill development if I work in tech? If I'm working in an industry that's adjacent to tech, what has impact me? Will there be less demand for certain manufacturers and things like that? Do I need to switch up my career? If you are in tech and there are lots of layoffs, I covered recently, hedge funds are hiring a lot more, or they're looking for tech expertise, and you can get paid very high salaries as being a tech expert in finance. So there's all sorts of opportunities in between all this change. And if you want expert help, right, I can help you through taking control of your career to help you build power, pay, and freedom through career coaching. That's the main way I can help, right? I'll help you make more money. I'll help you have more stability and security over the long term of your career, rather than having the rug pulled from up under you by these type of situations, right? Now you want to be more of a sovereign individual, an independent free man, and less dependent on what are the current whims of a corporation, even though you've done great work and then they put you up for a layoff, right, through no fault of your own. So I've done this myself. I've been in the hyper competitive environment that includes Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, and HSBC, and I know what actually works to survive over the long term in these type of environments. Now, I have a course, which I mentioned earlier, which help you with office politics. I have a free ebook, which will help you with the career secrets that helped me throughout my career to gain power and respect at work. And also have an email newsletter called a Mailbox Money newsletter, which is free. You can sign up to it by the link in description, and twice a week, Monday and Friday, you will get an email with free career advice sent straight to your inbox that will help you boost your career prospects. So if you found that interesting, let me know in the comments. What do you think about Intel and these job cuts? It's quite big news. What do you think about these two short stories we shared? The older guy, the younger woman, both getting caught up in these kind of completely markets. Let me know in the comments. 2 recommended videos on your screen right now, and I'll see you next time.